When I first started watching The Dragon Prince on Netflix, I had no idea that one of the lead writers was also a writer for Avatar: The Last Airbender, though this became quickly apparent over the course of the first episode. I wasn't 100% certain by the time the credits rolled, but the book chapter title card at the start of the following episode confirmed my suspicions. Now knowing that this fantasy story was at least partially written by someone who had a hand in creating one of the most beloved animated children's shows of all time, I was pretty stoked. The art direction is very nice, the animation features plenty of good facial expressions, and the fight choreography is arguably on par with Avatar's. I'm also a big fan of 3D visuals with heavy outlines and cel shading since it makes it look similar to 2D. Apparently some people find the choppy animation style to be cheap looking, but I personally found it rather charming as it feels reminiscent of stop motion, and the frame rate does increase a bit where it needs to. I really enjoy how magic is depicted in this universe as well. The separation between creatures that are born with magic and humans who resort to draining the life force from them in order to use it themselves is a somewhat heavy-handed analogy, but an interesting one nonetheless, and I think it adds a lot of richness to the world that these characters inhabit. The Dragon Prince had all the makings of a show to potentially rival Avatar, but unfortunately, the writing misses the mark in a few ways. I had actually started watching this show over 3 years ago, and I could remember feeling surprisingly bored while progressing through Season 1, which would explain why, according to my watch history, I had only gotten through about a third of Season 2. The first 3 episodes of Season 1 are solid, set up a good premise, and introduces us to some promising characters. How could it not be memorable? Where could this show possibly have gone wrong? It wasn't until I recently rewatched the first season and finished watching the second that I fully understood what the problem was. The characters feel way too similar. For the sake of establishing a metric, I'd like to quickly go over the characters of Last Airbender so I can compare and contrast. Aang is enthusiastic and carefree, albeit naive at times. Katara is motherly and supportive, but sometimes overly controlling. Toph is the blunt and sarcastic one of the group, but can always be relied on during a fight. Even Sokka, despite shouldering most of the comedic relief, undergoes a lot of development while grappling with his insecurities over becoming a good leader like his father, and most of his struggles are self-inflicted, which only adds to the humor surrounding his character. Then there's the overly serious Zuko, who never cracks a smile. He starts out very narrow-minded and desperate for approval before eventually smartening up and getting a better haircut. What does the Dragon Prince have to offer? Well, there's the quirky and sarcastic character, and did I mention the quirky and sarcastic character? The main characters have so few distinguishing traits between them that they all just start to blend together. If I were to use a single adjective to describe most of the cast of Dragon Prince, it would be adorkable. You know what I mean. They'll sometimes deliver witty one-liners, but will also stumble over their words in an awkward sort of way. And this archetype is really fitting for characters such as Claudia. She's a nerdy mage who's often lost in thought, and who exasperates the other characters with her quirkiness. But she doesn't have the chance to stand out because all the other main characters are written in order to fill what might as well be the same comedic role. I think Rayla is impacted the most by this because thematically she's one of the more interesting members of the cast. I really like her accent, by the way. I want to say it's Scottish, but that's purely a guess on my part.
Interesting theory. Care to discuss?
Rayla is a Moonshadow elf who's learning to be an assassin, which is made rather difficult by the fact that she's never taken a life before. Her character is given a really good internal struggle in which she has to choose between loyalty to her own kind and doing what she personally feels is right. Ezran's cheerful personality and cadence is almost identical to Aang's. Callum is obviously the Sokka of the group, he's even voiced by the same person, but Rayla is basically Sokka number 2 when she should feel similar to Zuko. She would have been raised to be disciplined, laser-focused, and extremely wary of humans. The only major difference between her and Zuko is that she joins our heroes at the very start rather than 2/3 of the way through the story. Take a moment to imagine Book 1 Zuko having to put up with the antics of Aang and Sokka during a forced road trip. This could have been an amazing dynamic. Rayla should have started out as callous and closed off, while Callum and Ezrin gradually chip away at her tough exterior. But instead, Rayla participates in the banter right from the get-go because everyone is the same goddamn character. Look, she's doing an impression of a human. That's hilarious. So hilarious, in fact, that she's going to do it again in Season 2.
Let's go judge and criticize things other humans do, and then do the exact same thing ourselves.
Or, as they say in the Fire Nation, stay flamin'. Greetings, my good hotman.
Hi. I guess.
There's a moment at the start of the second episode that, to me, was an early warning sign of this Adorkable problem.
Hey, could I borrow your sharpener thingy?
Whetstone.
Yeah, that.
No.
How would Rayla, the assassin in training, not know what a whetstone is? Has she never sharpened her own weapons before? I get that she's never used them to kill, but she's clearly proficient with them. She clearly has combat experience. This is what I mean when I say that almost every character is undermined by the writer's insistence that they all be awkwardly endearing. There's also what should have been an especially pivotal moment at the end of episode 4. The episode starts out with Callum remembering about a cube with markings on it that he believes will help him learn magic. He last saw it in their old winter lodge, which happens to be in the same direction the three of them are headed. Rayla is purely focused on getting the dragon egg to Zadia and would rather not take any detours that would risk her being discovered in hostile territory. But Callum insists and Rayla eventually acquiesces. They head to the lodge believing it to be empty, but run into the brothers' aunt Amaya. Rayla goes into hiding and is eventually discovered by Amaya. The group ends up surrounded, and Callum makes the impulsive decision to make it seem like Rayla has taken the boys hostage in order to, in his words, drink their blood. This catches Rayla off guard and nearly gets her killed. Callum's plan does work out in the end, but leaves Rayla feeling understandably hurt.
Oh, that went well. They tried to kill me.
I'm sorry. That's not what I meant to happen.
Well, it did.
You found it?
It's a toy. Probably a piece from a children's game. I hope it was worth it to you. Putting everyone's lives in danger.
Over the course of this episode, Callum has f***ed up in every conceivable way. He tells Rayla that the Winter Lodge will be deserted, only to remember that, oops, this was where their dad was sending them, meaning he of course arranged to have some of his troops meet them there. Ezrin makes the sensible suggestion that they just tell Amaya the truth, to which Callum responds, "No, you dumb baby, there's too much history between elves and humans for that to work. Aunt Amaya would never believe us." Which is a pretty weak argument, considering that they could just show her the egg that was the catalyst for the entire war, at which point she'd likely be willing to at least hear them out. And then, without making any attempt to fill Rayla in on his sudden plan, even though he has like 20 seconds to do so, he tells Amaya that Rayla is going to drink their blood. Callum is not an endearing dork, he's just an idiot. Any goodwill that these characters have built up over the past episode should have been shattered in this moment. On top of that, Rayla makes a valid point that Callum had really selfish motives for putting her in danger. The cube did in fact have magic properties, but that's pretty irrelevant at this point. Think about it from Rayla's perspective. She abandoned her mission once she learned the egg wasn't destroyed, got into a risky sword fight with her squad leader, and even offers to help Callum save his stepdad shortly after. Then, only a day into their journey, Callum puts Rayla's life on the line also he can get his hands on a glow-in-the-dark cube. If I were Rayla, I'd be f***ing pissed.
That worked! I can't believe it.
I can't believe you're such a jerk.
What? What's wrong?
What? What did I do? Why are you so mad? Shut the f*** up, Callum. This outcome only increases the racial divide between the human characters and Rayla the elf. It's possibly the only scene in which we really get to see that tension, and I thought that it would get expanded on in the following episode. Episode 5 picks up with Callum dicking around with his newly acquired cube and Rayla being only slightly annoyed by past events. Callum then forces this poor girl, who he just recently learned is aquaphobic, back onto a boat and down a series of rapids. Then Rayla has to overcome her fear in order to rescue Bait, the dumb animal mascot. She just met these two a few days ago. Why would she put so much effort into rescuing their pet? At least make Callum get in the water. A fear of water is a cute and humanizing trait for Rayla to have, but after everything that just happened in the previous episode, following it up with this one makes her feel like a narrative punching bag. The simplest way to fix this would be to just switch episodes 5 and 6 around, but it wouldn't fix the core issue, which is that the writers keep missing opportunities to make Rayla a much more compelling character and make the main trio's bond more believable. If I could write episode 5, it would go something like this. Rayla, feeling betrayed by Callum's actions, sneaks off with the dragon egg during the night and continues the mission solo. Callum and Ezrin wake up to find both Rayla and the egg missing and proceed to angrily track her down. Somewhere along the way, Rayla runs into some trouble with a large creature of some kind, so long as it's something that will target both her and the brothers. This allows Callum and Ezrin to catch up to her, at which point Callum distracts said creature with some magic. This gives Rayla an opening to escape, but now the boys are in danger. Rayla begins to leave them behind, but she stops herself. She glances over her shoulder. Just like back in episode 1, she has a decision to make. Get the egg back to her people and be hailed as a hero, thereby restoring her family's honor, or do the morally correct thing by rescuing the brothers and delivering the egg to Zadia together, thereby quelling the hatred between elves and humans. She of course decides to go back and helps them escape as well. The episode ends with them banding together once again and talking out their differences, during which Callum gives Rayla a proper apology and says he'll actually start listening to her from now on. This is a very rushed synopsis, and I think it could be fleshed out over the course of more than one episode, but either way, we need to see the bond between these three get tested and then re-established in such a way that makes it stronger than it was before. The writers attempt to do this in episode 6, but by then a lot of the emotional momentum is gone, and the lead up to Callum and Rayla's argument doesn't even make sense. At the start of episode 6, Rayla gets ambushed by Corvus the Hunter, but manages to shake him. She then starts rushing the boys along without bothering to explain why, which Callum finds both irritating and suspicious. Quick question, why wouldn't Rayla just tell them that an assassin is after her? It's implied that she's afraid the brothers would hate her if they were to learn that their dad is dead, but why would she have to reveal that part? There's multiple reasons why she'd be being hunted, and Corvus's mission is to track down the princes, not get revenge for the king. Even if she did choose to reveal it to them, Rayla wasn't the one who killed their dad, and this was an outcome that Callum was already prepared for back in episode 2. The writers clearly just needed a reason for Callum to be mad at Rayla because she already had plenty of reason to be mad at him. It's during their argument that Rayla points out that she could have just run away with the egg but chose not to, even though that's exactly what she should have done. Why wouldn't she leave them behind at this point? Obviously they need to stick together for the sake of the plot, but Rayla is overly patient and apologetic towards a couple of strangers who can barely pull their own weight. Hell, in episode 5, if Rayla had simply refused to get back in the water and left rescuing Bait up to the brothers, that would at least give Callum a slight reason to be annoyed with her. Things just kind of happen to the characters without them taking the time to internalize any of it because we gotta make room for the jokes, folks. Which ties into the second thing I took issue with. The comedy is too forced at times. Don't get me wrong, some of the jokes did genuinely get a chuckle out of me.
Well, fun as it would be to turn the chains into snakes, I guess I'll just use the key.
But instead of handpicking those genuinely good jokes while leaving all the mediocre ones on the cutting room floor, the writers seemed intent on cramming as many of them into a single episode as possible, to the point that a lot of them don't even land very well. Here's just one of several examples that stood out to me.
What a beautiful challenge you've given me. I must come up with something you will fear more than death.
Excuse me. I would love to try some Zadian fruit. Very good.
I know we just had a rather dark line delivery, but this other guy who's chained up also wants some fruit. Isn't that funny? We can't just end the scene there because this joke is so funny that we just have to include it. This happens over and over and over again. Scenes that are supposed to be taken seriously are peppered with small gags and quips that don't do a whole lot other than undermine the mood that's supposed to be communicated. I find it especially frustrating when the dialogue breaks my immersion in this world that the writers are trying to build.
Nah, why kill them when you can break their brains with insane illusions? I've got some real mind melters. They would completely freak your bean. Interested?
This woman is an elven illusionist who's been living on a mountaintop for eons. Why did she sound like a middle-aged parent who just discovered slang from the early 2000s? It's maddening. The Last Airbender was quite good at knowing how to utilize visual gags in order to fulfill a particular purpose, and banter between characters was there to either develop those characters further or establish the group dynamics more clearly. There was a certain finesse to it that the Dragon Prince seems to lack. The tonal whiplash throughout this show was so frequent that I could start to feel it in my neck. Yes, Airbender had its fair share of childish humor too, but it was never shoehorned in right before or after a murder plot. The Dragon Prince repeatedly bounces between appealing to a very young audience and having serious discussions about death without properly spacing out those two extremes. Case in point, near the end of Season 2, Soren gets paralyzed from the neck down during an altercation with a dragon, cries about it for a bit, then the following day starts reciting his bad poetry. Is this supposed to be a heavy dramatic moment or a comedic one? The writers don't seem to know. Seeing as the show already features a deaf character, and Airbender was never much of a stranger to disabled characters in general, I really thought that Soren would just be left paralyzed from the waist down and start serving a non-combative role in the story. But in episode 9, Claudia fully heals Soren using dark magic, so it's fine, I guess. Don't worry about it. I assume this moment is meant to foreshadow Claudia becoming corrupted by dark magic to the point that she goes insane as a sort of reversal of Zuko's character arc, but I still think that arc should have been given to Rayla. I also think there's other ways it could have been done that didn't involve a severe spinal injury. It just felt like a weird progression of events. I have a lot of respect for Aaron Ehas along with everyone else who came together to create something truly great. From the writers, voice actors, and sound designers to the animators, choreographers, and composers. Avatar: The Last Airbender was a show that consistently brightened up my childhood whenever I happened to catch it on television, even if it was halfway through an episode. But it's because of this respect that I can't help but feel dissatisfied by this spiritual predecessor. Maybe if some of the jokes had been swapped out for more genuine interactions and the relationships between these characters had been more of a slow burn, I'd feel differently. It's true that I've yet to watch the remaining 5 seasons of this show, but I'm doubtful that they would provide anything that would make up for how disappointing I found the first 2 to be. The other lead writer for this show was Justin Richmond, who apparently directed several of the Uncharted games. I'm not familiar with the plot of the Uncharted series, but I am curious as to how his writing style measures up to Aaron's. Though it could also be the case that Aaron's writing ability is weakened without the guidance of ATLA's original creators, Michael DiMartino and Brian Konietzko. It's also possible that Netflix had made a few demands as to what the final script should look like, but I suppose we'll never know. I'm more frustrated than anything because The Dragon Prince was almost good. All the building blocks were there, but the end result is lopsided. At the risk of sounding annoyingly vague, it just doesn't hit the same. Thanks for getting to the end of this video, and rather than continue with The Dragon Prince, I think I'll just go rewatch ATLA.